Hi, everyone. May peace be on you all, and welcome to another episode of I'm a Muslim and That's Okay. And I'm back with yet another, the whole Muslim. I've been featuring a lot of Muslims because my last season, it seemed like there was not enough. But I found some really, really great people. And one of them I know in person, Dr. Sadaf Lodhi. You are like the very first time I met you, I was like, she can't be for real. This is not correct. But I'm going to get to that. Dr. Sadaf is an OBGYN, but that's not why I'm here because, again, that's not the extraordinary part about her. I mean, what she does is important. Let's not make that mistake by any means. But you, Dr. Sadaf, are also an intimacy coach. And to compound that, you're a fellow podcaster, and your podcast, the Muslim Sex Podcast. I mean, whopper right there, like 3 in 1, Dr. Sadaf, and I can't be happier to have you with me.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. Thank you.
The pleasure is all mine. But like I said, and well, as we were talking, you are the unicorn in so many different ways. Because let's be honest, as sex therapists are is a fairly new thing, no matter which way you look at it, even like in the wider context of culture. Because traditionally, sex has always been like a taboo thing, even under wider contexts. Going to a sex therapist, like it's usually seen as some sort of weird failure on the part of society. Not a lot of people would be open to that. But then you really went deep into the fact that you're an intimacy coach for Muslims. How did that come about? I mean, take us to the beginning, Dr. Sadaf. Like, where did this all of this come from?
I know, it's funny. I get this question all the time.
I'm sure. I don't doubt that for a second.
Yeah. So basically, I am a board certified OBGYN, and I grew up in just a traditional home, and same thing. Parents are, my family, the community that I was raised in is pretty conservative. Right. And nobody really talked about intimacy for sure. I mean, that's a given. Nobody talked about sex. And in fact, I had sex education in 5th grade, and I didn't attend because my parents didn't really understand why that was necessary.
You didn't get permission, did you?
Not at all. No, I didn't go. I wasn't go. I wasn't allowed. I didn't go. So I had to like sit outside in like the jungle gym, and I was just sitting there waiting for everyone. And then like people came out, and this little boy said to me, he's like, "Oh, your calendar is the most important thing." And I had no idea. He was like a little like 5th grader. And I had no idea what he was talking about. I was like, what is he even saying to me? So yes, I never had sex ed. And so then fast forward, I became an OBGYN, and, just doing OB for a long time and still doing OBGYN. And then I realized that, I would have patients come to me and ask me questions about their sexual health and what was going on with them, and, different topics like decreased libido and arousal and things like that. And to be honest, I really wouldn't know how to answer that. I mean, I could Google it, right? And I could find that out, but I didn't really have the medical knowledge to even answer their questions. And so the reason being is because in medical school, we only get a few hours of sex ed.
Really?
So really, yes.
That's so weird.
Yes, it is. So, for example, we only learn about the Masters and Johnson sexual response cycle, which is actually based on old white men in the 1960s. Yeah. And it was a husband and wife researcher, Masters and Johnson, that did the research, but it was really the male sexual response. And so that is what we were taught in medical school. And then no one had actually put together or even really did much research on the female sexual response until 2001. There was a woman named Rosemary Basson who put together the female sexual response cycle. And so now that's being taught and that's being taught all over. With now, I don't know if it's being taught in medical schools. I can't say that because I went to medical school a while ago.
Right.
So, I'd have to ask somebody that's going through medical school to see what they're still teaching,
Right. Right.
Um, but so that's what I learned. And then in my OBGYN residency, I didn't learn anything about sex ed either. Can you believe that?
Wow.
4 years. 4 years of residency. We go through obstetrics where we learn, about the developing fetus and all the things that can go wrong with the fetus. And we learn about labor and delivery and C-sections and all that stuff. And then we learn about gynecology and the female reproductive tract and cancers and, pathologies associated with that. But we never learn about sex. Never learn about,
that is so weird, Dr. Sadaf. Like, I can't comprehend this.
I know, and it doesn't make sense, but it's true, at least for me. And I can tell you that just a few years ago, I was an attending physician that was teaching residents, and I can guarantee you they weren't learning anything about sex ed either.
Wow.
So, the question then becomes, where do physicians learn their information, right? So if we have patients coming to us asking us questions, but we ourselves don't know or never learned it, then what do we do? Right. And that really is the dilemma. So I was in 2021, I came to realize, and I knew that before, but it was really something that I sat down and thought about. And I was like, you know what, there's really this huge void. Okay. Not only in medicine, because even when you talk to other physicians, I'll tell you, they are very uncomfortable talking about sex. And it's really interesting because like sex is all around us, right? Especially in the Western hemisphere.
Right.
And we see it in the news, we see it in the media, we see it in, magazines, we see it in cartoons, we see it everywhere, right? Movies, there's porn,
a huge industry. I mean, I hate to put it that way, but it is.
It is. But you know what the interesting thing is that even with all of that, I would still say that our society is pretty sex negative, right? There's a huge taboo, right? And we see like with Roe v. Wade, we see with comprehensive sex education, really there isn't comprehensive sex education for kids because kids don't learn. I mean, what are they learning? They're learning maybe, and you know what the interesting thing is that they learn based on where they are located. So for example, if they're like in a more, say, liberal state, they'll learn something different than a more conservative state. And it's all even based on the school district, right? So you could be in a liberal state, but be in a conservative school district and not get the appropriate information, because even though each state gets money and federal funding for sex education, it's not regulated. So the states can decide how they want to teach. Right. So we have different laws, as you know, passing in Florida as opposed to New York. Right. So kids are learning something else. So we are teaching, it's one thing to have our own beliefs. Right. And nobody's going to touch that. You have your belief. I have my belief, whatever. But it's another thing to provide comprehensive sexual education that is, science-backed, evidence-based, researched and then culturally relevant, right? So you're going to tell somebody that in, for example, the state of Texas that you're in, right? I believe are you in Texas? Yeah. So, they have one of the most strictest abortion laws. And you have reproductive refugees that are going to different states to have abortions, right? I mean, it's really unfortunate. And so, still, you're not going to prevent unplanned pregnancy. You are not going to prevent intimate partner violence. You are not going to prevent sexually transmitted infections if you don't teach people how to protect themselves, right? And if you want really to help people, you really have to start from the beginning. You have to start with children. And nobody's saying that at 5 years old, you're going to be, teaching children how to have sex, right? That's not what we're saying.
We're saying at any age, you're really teaching kids how to have sex. But the thing is, the point is that this should not be taboo. Like, no matter which way you look at it, I mean, a lot of people have different things in Muslim circles. It's not that sex is forbidden. It's like different contexts of where sexual activity happens. That's the thing.
Correct. And that's the thing, right, that we don't understand. So just going back, so even though there's sex all around us, I would say that in society, it is still very sex negative. And so when you go to your physician, right, and you ask them about like, sexual health or questions, whatever, their comfort level is going to vary, right? Some
Mm.
may be really open to talk with. Some others may say, you know what, why don't you go ask your gynecologist? I'm not sure, this and that. And then when you go to your gynecologist, if your gynecologist doesn't know, who are you supposed to go ask?
That's what I'm wondering.
Right?
Like literally,
Yes.
like if somebody has a problem of the sexual
Well,
nature, where are they going?
right. And then compound that with if your gynecologist doesn't agree with whatever it is that their patient is asking, right? So say that their patient comes in and isn't married,
Right.
but that gynecologist doesn't believe in premarital sex,
Oy.
but that patient is asking questions, or if the patient is asking about abortion, that physician should not be making decisions based on their values,
Values. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because you can't be putting your ideas onto other people. You
Right.
should just be helping them for whatever they come in for,
Right. Right.
right? So we have this scenario now where there are some physicians, because they feel uncomfortable with the topic or with the nature of the question, they refuse to even, entertain the question, which I think is unfortunate, right? Because that really doesn't help the
It
patient at all.
doesn't help the patient at all. And plus, with all of these anti, I would call them anti-reproductive health laws,
Yeah,
like the Roe v. Wade being overturned. People just look at it in one way, with the fact that it's premarital sex or sex outside of marriage or whatever it may be. But ultimately, especially in Texas, I could have an ectopic pregnancy and I could die from it, but there'd be nobody who would be doing an abortion on me.
that is correct. Correct. And so, and this is just kind of a side note, with an ectopic pregnancy, as it's pregnancy outside of the uterus.
Right.
So if it ruptures, that's not even a viable pregnancy to begin
No,
with, right? And
no.
that pregnancy, if it grows, it's going to kill the
Yeah,
mom.
yeah,
If it ruptures, it's going to kill the
yeah.
mom. So it really needs to be
Right.
removed. And the fact that it's, physicians' hands are tied is really, really unfortunate,
Yeah.
because it doesn't help anyone.
Right.
It's definitely not helping the mom,
Right.
that's for sure.
And
um, so yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
and that's the thing. I mean, here from what you've told us is that there is still such a lacking in physicians being able to help their
Yeah,
patients with any kind of sexual knowledge, whatever it may be. There's a number of different I would hate to call it a sexual dysfunction, but any number of things where patients are not having the sexual experience as it should be, and it's a medical reason. They
right.
probably can't consult with their OBGYN on any of these things, even though that would be the first place that anyone would go for it.
Right. Right, right. So that's actually what started my journey,
Mhm.
right? So I thought about, like, there was this huge void. I myself
Mhm.
didn't feel equipped to answer questions. So
Right.
then, what was the solution? So the solution, and especially, um, in our Muslim communities, a lot of
Mhm.
times we don't talk about these topics, right?
At
Because
all.
again, like shameful, dirty,
Right.
wrong, embarrassing, even though we know that Islam is a very sex positive
Hmm.
religion. you know it's that most others do not know that,
Right.
and those women then don't give themselves permission
Right.
to learn about it, because they feel like it's wrong or dirty, that they're committing a sin, and that they're not really supposed to be learning about this stuff, right?
Right.
And so with that sex negativity, then a lot of problems
Oh
arise.
yeah.
And so then I felt like, who else better than a gynecologist
Hmm.
to really, get equipped to be able to answer these questions. So then I did a year-long course with the University of Michigan for sexual counseling and education. So I'm actually a sex counselor, and I did coaching through Rutgers
Hmm.
University, and so I learned how to coach people. And so that's really how I married all of that together. So as a gynecologist, basically I help women. As a gynecologist, as an intimacy
Right.
coach, I basically help women to remove physical and mental barriers to experiencing pleasure in their relationship.
If I could ask you, and here's the thing, especially you had mentioned, because it can be taboo, especially within Muslim circles, even though it doesn't need to be. Um, how do you break down that barrier? Like, again, it'd be hard enough for a woman to come to you and be like, I have this problem. And then with whatever counseling you give, for them to really take that in and,
Yeah.
I guess, apply it in a sense.
Right. So the women that do approach me, they have a lot. So there, definitely lots of different issues
Mm-hmm.
that come up, whether it's with arousal, libido, or just, mismatched libido, all
Right.
of those things. Basically, what I do, and that's really why I'm so glad I'm a coach, is
Mm.
because it all starts with your thoughts,
Right.
right? And so breaking it down to the root of the problem. And a
Mm.
lot of times, if women are thinking that sex is wrong, dirty,
Mm.
shameful, embarrassing, all of those things, then to start with that,
Right.
right? And look at those thoughts. Because once we analyze the thoughts, then those thoughts, whatever thoughts they are,
Mm.
right? Thoughts create feelings,
Right.
and then people act on those feelings,
Right.
right?
Right.
So feelings create actions. But if we can go to where it all starts, which are the thoughts, and try to help the patient or the woman change those
Mm-hmm.
thoughts from that it's wrong, it's shameful, it's dirty, then that'll create a different feeling, right? So think about it. If you think that sex is a wonderful thing
Mm-hmm.
and that it's something really, beautiful that two people
Mm-hmm.
that really care about each other can enjoy and experience, then it creates a different feeling, right? It
Right.
creates a feeling of like happiness.
Right. Right.
And then if that feeling of happiness, then the action there is that you would hopefully want it, right?
Right.
As opposed to thinking that sex is wrong or dirty or shameful, then it creates a feeling of shame or guilt.
Right.
And then the action would be that you really don't desire or want it because you don't want that negative feeling,
Right.
right?
Right.
So that's kind of where I go.
Right. And I think it's fantastic, especially if Muslim women do come to you, approach you, and now you have I guess the skill and the knowledge to help them. But like when you look at overall statistics, I'm not even talking about just within Muslim circles. Pleasure for women is about I guess, almost 60-40 ratio. Most women, only like 40% of women experience sexual pleasure as opposed to 60% of men. And I think this is an old statistic, but I read this a long time ago. So the fact is that um, there is a imbalance over there where it's not just that women are not are not doing what needs to be done in an intimacy. Is this that men are not aware as well? How do you approach that within like a Muslim context? A lot of dudes are
Yeah.
not going to be happy about, coached in this sort of area.
Yeah, yeah. So, I think that's really where communication comes into play,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I am coaching women,
Mm-hmm.
and what I do is usually I start out with the mindset.
Right.
And then we also then go over anatomy because a lot of women are not familiar with their own
Oh yeah.
anatomy because they were never given permission
Right.
to even look at their own anatomy,
Yeah.
right? So, to go over the anatomy and then after that to look at ways to move forward.
Mm.
Now, there is actually something called the Female Sexual Satisfaction Survey.
Mm.
And when they asked participants, what was the number one thing that helped you become more sexually
Mm-hmm.
satisfied? And the number one reason was communication.
Mm.
So if women had open communication where they were able to and felt comfortable
Right.
discussing with their partner their desires, their wants,
Right.
and what they like, then they were more sexually satisfied, which makes sense,
Yeah.
right?
Oh
If
yeah.
you have that communication. And those that did not have that open communication, obviously they were not as satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you were just saying that, how do you deal with when men are not on board? Well, that, is really comes into the women talking to the husbands,
Mm.
right? To their partners about what they want. And if they're not able to talk to their partners
Right.
about that, then, that is another thing that to really look at and be like, well, why are you not able to have that type of conversation? Because what I believe is that whatever is happening in the bedroom is also happening outside of the bedroom,
Right.
right? So you're not able to have these intimate, delicate very important conversations regarding sexual intimacy, then you're probably not having a lot of other conversations either,
Right,
right?
right,
And what does your overall communication look like?
right.
Do you typically talk to your partner? Are you not talking to your partner?
Mm,
Are you stonewalling your partner? Are you, just basically roommates
right,
and just passing each other by, right?
right.
So I think that then leads a person to really look at their relationship holistically.
Holistically, that's what I would imagine. But again, Dr. Sadaf, what you're doing is like, again, it's so unusual. And on top of that, you have the Muslim Sex podcast. Tell us about that. What are you doing in your podcast?
Yeah, I know, right? So that name actually came about. Initially, I had started the podcast with a friend of mine, and I actually was really hesitant to call it that
Hmm.
because I had my own kind of feelings that I had to work around, right, with
Right.
that word sex, because I myself felt a little bit hesitant to use that
Hmm.
word. And she was like, no, no, we have to use that because that's gonna all of a sudden catch people's attention and be like, what the heck is that? It's
Yeah.
almost like an oxymoron, right? People don't think that Muslims have
Right,
sex.
right.
So yeah, so that's why we named it that.
Mm,
And then initially when I first started, I was doing a lot of like topics about obstetrics and gynecology and kind of went through the whole thing. And then I decided to kind of, I guess, change the direction a little bit.
mm.
So basically what I do is I interview a lot of
Right,
physicians and a lot of people, and everything relates back to intimacy and
right,
relationships.
right.
And so now that's kind of more of my focus. So, for example, I had on somebody that was an obesity coach
Mm,
who's a family doctor and an obesity coach. And then we talked about how weight affects body image, which then affects how people feel, which then will affect their intimacy and their relationship with their partner,
mm,
right? I had on somebody else that was an attorney and she talked about domestic violence. I
mm,
had on a domestic violence survivor,
mm,
and she talked about her journey. I've had on all different people. I've had on a few psychiatrists.
mm,
One of my family friends is a psychiatrist, and he did a 3-part series on anxiety in relationships and
mm.
how that manifests and how that affects intimacy. So they're all like different topics.
Right.
I've done a few topics on perimenopause, menopause, things like that.
Mm,
So it all kind of relates back to intimacy, but they're just different things, in a woman's life
mm.
that may affect her.
Right, right. So, if somebody wants to really like have a deeper look into the intimacy of their relationship, it's not just about sexual activity.
Right,
You
right.
had said, first of all, first and foremost is communication, right? um what would you like advise, like, for everybody who's listening, that communication is key, but what else? That I mean, that's the thing. When people talk about sex, it's just about the act of sex, but it's a lot more. Like, intimacy is more than the physical act itself. So what would you how would you guide people into what real full intimacy is?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So actually, as you know, intimacy, there's different types of intimacy. We
Mm,
have emotional intimacy,
right.
right? And emotional intimacy is where you can be vulnerable with your spouse or
Hmm.
your partner. You are able to discuss your feelings,
Mm,
your thoughts, your desires, and all of that, right? That creates emotional intimacy.
right.
There is also intellectual intimacy where
Mm,
you can share your ideas. Perhaps you're spiritually connected
right.
and things like that. And of course, there's physical intimacy. So, looking at all those different parts of intimacy, a lot of times women prefer the emotional intimacy
Right.
and want that connection
Hmm.
with their partner even before the physical intimacy,
Right.
right, comes. So, they want to have a connection. It's really rare. I shouldn't say really rare because women are not a monolith. So, it is not as common for women to have sex with somebody. Um, and not feel that emotional
Connection.
connection, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Not as common. It
Right.
can happen, and of course it does
Right,
happen,
right.
but it's not as common. And so when we look at the female sexual response cycle, a lot of things can affect it. And so desire and arousal are affected with the barometer
Mm.
of their relationship, right?
Right.
So that's kind of actually sex is a barometer of their relationship,
Mm.
of what's happening in their
Right.
relationship. And so many things can affect the female sexual response cycle, right? So we also have this biopsychosocial model that
Mhm.
comes in where, for example, medical conditions, right?
Right.
Like, say, like diabetes or chronic issues, chronic pain, all
Mhm.
of those can affect whether or not a person's going to be intimate. There can be medications that affect a
Right.
person's desire, arousal, right? We know that birth control pills will definitely affect desire, it
Mhm.
decreases desire. There are other medications, for example, like calcium channel blockers for somebody that has high blood pressure,
Mhm.
or some diabetic meds will also affect desire. We also know that anxiety and depression, meds for those can affect desire,
Mhm.
right? And of course, the cultural aspect of it, right? So
Right.
when we talk about the biopsychosocial, the social aspect of it, which is the cultural aspect, for example, how was that person raised, right? If
Right.
they were raised in a very sex negative environment, then it's unlikely that they're going to want to have sex,
Mm.
right? Unless they think of it as like a wifely duty, or, another chore that they
Right.
have to do,
Right. Right.
right? Um, Also, the uneven distribution of household chores.
Mm.
There's been a study on that, and that absolutely negatively affects desire,
For real.
because if right, because you are always, doing all the work around the house,
It's not even just
then
work. There's so much emotional load to a lot of things, that
yeah,
especially as moms, we have to do. It's not just like
right,
cooking,
right.
cleaning, or anything. You're basically planning out 10 bajillion things for little people in your lives.
That's correct. That's correct. So when you have all that going
Hmm.
on, sex then goes to the bottom of the list, and it just becomes one more
Right.
thing
Right.
on your
Right.
checklist, right? So it's really not a priority.
Mm.
And so, or if you have single moms,
Right.
right, that are trying to do everything,
Right. Right.
that's
Right.
really not going to be top of priority either.
Hmm.
So there's so many things that go into this female sexual response cycle that affect arousal and desire,
Hmm.
that, a lot of times women don't want to have sex
Yeah.
for those reasons,
Right. Right.
right, that I just stated. And so really it's important when a woman comes in to really assess all those things
Right.
and make sure that you're covering all those different topics, because there's a lot more to it than, oh, she just doesn't want to have sex.
Right.
There's
Right.
so many reasons
Right.
why that may or may not be the case.
No, I mean, I think, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. No, no, I just want to say, one more thing is that, there's a great author. I don't know if you've read her book, Come As You Are, Emily Nagoski. I
I've
always
heard of
mention
her,
her.
but
Yeah,
definitely.
she's done a few TED Talks, and she's a
Mm.
psychologist, and I believe she's a sex
Mm.
therapist. Um, but she's done a lot of research
Mm.
on women and the female sexual response, and what, she, in her book Come As You Are, she basically talks about things that will inhibit the sexual response, and things that will cause it to go. So she
Right.
calls it the brakes and the accelerators.
Mm.
And so she talks about that, and different things will affect that.
Right. Right.
And one of the things that she says, which I think is so true, is, to want sex is to have sex worth wanting. Meaning,
Wow.
like, what?
No, no, wow. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I never thought of it that way,
exactly.
but yes.
Yes, yeah. So right, so it's unlikely that somebody is going to want sex if they're not really getting anything from it,
Yeah.
right? So if they're not experiencing pleasure,
Right. Right.
if their partner doesn't care,
Right.
if their partner doesn't really communicate, if their partner's not even willing to learn about the female anatomy,
Right.
right, to pleasure them, then they're really not getting anything out of that experience.
Hmm.
So then they're probably going to have a lot of excuses and reasons to not want to have it.
Oh yeah. And that's the thing. For especially for women, like even those that are trying to really create, I guess, a, a better sexual experience for them, they then do have to face a lot of backlash for it as well. A lot of women who are sex positive are then seen as being too open or being too demanding, and all of these things sort of does fall into their thing. But the fact is, for any real relationship, it has to go both ways. It shouldn't not be just a chore.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And it's really important for, the spouse to learn and understand what, I mean, if they're interested, right? So sometimes if you think your relationship is just failing and you don't care,
Mhm.
then then
That's
that's fine,
different.
whatever. Right, you don't care. But if you are in a relationship where you actually do care,
Hmm.
and both partners, both people really care about the other person,
Right.
but just don't know how to go about it, then it behooves you to really just communicate.
Hmm.
And, I've had the question like, well, we're so busy, we don't have time.
Right.
But, everyone has the same amount of time in a day, right?
Hmm.
Everyone has 24
Right.
hours. The thing is that you have to create time, right? So for
Prioritize.
anything, right, for anything that's really important in your life, you
Right.
write it down. You put it in your
Right.
calendar. You set aside time.
Right.
You
Right.
you know you like, for example, for you, you record podcasts, so
Hmm.
you put it in your calendar and you record it
Right.
and things like that. So for anyone that is trying to really improve their
Hmm.
relationship, you have to set aside time.
Right.
You have to make time. You have to create
Right.
time
Right.
in your day or in your week or whatever, right? And I think what's really important is that it is important to have, those date nights. And everybody kind of rolls their eyes and it's like, oh yeah, date nights, whatever. You've heard that before, but really it's true
Hmm.
because, that day or that night, you're telling the other person that they are really important to you
Right.
and that you are setting aside time for them,
Right.
right? So that's the time where you put away your phone, you turn it off, you
Hmm.
just don't have it so that you are completely engaged in your
Right.
conversations with your partner, all your attention is to them. And so they really feel as if they are important to you
Hmm.
because you have put all your attention on them, right?
Right.
And being mindful in relationships. So studies have also shown that when we are mindful, and they've done like mindful behavioral therapy in people that have decreased arousal
Mm.
and desire. And so they've noted that when women are more mindful when they are being intimate,
Mm.
right? So mindfulness is when you are basically in the moment
Right.
and without judgment and showing compassion to yourself. So right, so it's without judgment. So you're in that scenario and you really just focused on that scenario, right?
Mm.
Or say you're having dinner with your spouse or whoever, you're really just engrossed in what they're saying and really listening and really paying attention so that they feel like they're seen and heard.
Right.
Same thing when you're being physically intimate, right? You could be thinking about, like, how does the skin feel on my fingertips?
Hmm.
How does this feel? How does that feel, right? So that you are really present
Hmm.
in the situation and in the experience so that you really get the most joy out of it.
Hmm. One last question before, like, I give everybody the wonderful information of how to get in touch with you. Do you Are you just doing the your intimacy counseling for Muslim women, or is it open to everybody?
Yeah, no, it's open to
Hmm.
everyone. It's not specific. Actually, my clients right now that I have are not Muslim women.
Hmm.
So it is open to any, cisgendered female
Mm.
that is in a heteronormative relationship that is interested in trying to enhance her relationship with her partner and with herself. Really, it starts with yourself,
Hmm.
right? And it really starts with the feelings you have around intimacy and how you can improve it for yourself. Because once you feel like you are enjoying it, once you're in a good place, then you can enjoy it with somebody else,
Hmm.
right? It really begins with you and how you feel.
Right.
And so that's why I focus on women. And I think that maybe eventually I will start to coach couples as well,
Hmm.
because I do agree that it really takes both people
Right.
and that it's hard if you're just focusing on one person. But again, like I'll say, is that's really where the communication comes in. And it's really important. And, with my coaching clients, I give homework.
Mm.
And that's one of the homework is that you really need to communicate with your partner and you need to set aside time to have that communication.
But here's the thing, and that's where sort of all of this is in. Um, and again, I hope that one day, like, either you or somebody with you does start the whole couple thing, because it is sort of like the whole one-way communication can be hard when the other person is not sure how to navigate this this sort of newfound expectation. I think that's what it is that, especially when you age, you're like, but everything is going fine, when in essence it might not. It might be fine for one person but not the other person. But again, I love what you do. I love that you've created this, especially, you help women explore something that has been for forever been something that is imposed upon us as a taboo. And as for Muslim women, if Muslim women can come too, I think that's absolutely fantastic. So please tell my audience, where can they find you? How can they get in touch with you for your intimacy coaching, and just to get in touch with your podcast, just to learn more about themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am available on, you can go to my website at drsadaf.com. You can go on my Instagram or my TikTok at Dr. Sadaf OBGYN, and you can DM me there. There's also, I have a Beacons, which is like a link tree
Mhm.
where you can go ahead and schedule a consultation and get in touch with me there. You can email me at drsadaf at drsadaf.com. I'm also on YouTube at Dr. Sadaf Intimacy Coach, and I have a podcast, the Muslim Sex Podcast, which I would love for your viewers to listen to
Mhm.
and leave me a 5-star review, because I think it's really important to get the information out there and let people know that there is a resource
For
that they
sure.
can access and that is free,
Right.
right?
And again, I have mad respect for what you do, and I am so grateful that you do it. Really. Because
Yeah,
it's high time that somebody did this for us.
yeah, absolutely, right? I
Yeah.
agree
No, thank you so
100%.
much, Dr. Sada, for being here, for sharing all of this valuable information. I can't thank you enough. And thank you to everybody who's listened in and watched us on YouTube. Y'all take care of yourself, and may peace be on you all.